I'll wake up in the morning and realize I left my garage door open all night. You think of an 84-year-old woman, I said living by herself, sometimes familiarity breeds contempt. You get complacent in your routines, and you think you've locked something, but you haven't.
Morgan Wright is currently out on Nancy Guthrie's entryway steps, the exact spot showing bloody evidence of a struggle 49 days prior. This guy isn't just sitting at some desk viewing monitors. He refuses to investigate remotely. Instead, he visited Tucson to personally survey her entire yard. Strolling away from the main entrance, he heads straight down into the parking area. He carefully studies the paved sidewalk, tracing the precise route Nancy surely walked during the incident. Then he pauses instantly right where the paved path connects with the cement slab. Morgan points out that the Crimson Trail abruptly finishes off the path. You descend those stairs and step directly onto the blacktop. That is exactly where it ceases. It hasn't reached the roadway. It isn't sprayed all over the lawn, nor wandering off down the block. It halts precisely at the spot a getaway car was likely idling. Morgan Wright brings dozens of years of veteran police background. He currently directs the National Center for Open and Unsolved Cases as its chief executive. This man cracks mysteries everyone else deemed hopeless. We're talking files collecting dust for decades. Now, after personally inspecting Nancy's residence firsthand, retracing the abductor's literal footsteps and noticing things lenses missed, he formed a completely game-changing theory. Nobody picked this house randomly. It certainly wasn't some botched robbery attempt. The perpetrator didn't strike on a whim. The attack was calculated, focused, and intentional. Somebody studied Nancy's daily habits and learned the whole community. The suspects understood the best parking spot, the right way to navigate, and their precise time window. Currently, just 2 individuals hold the secret of Nancy's whereabouts, a duo that executed a cold, premeditated choice during the dark hours. A pair who parked their ride in that specific driveway location. 2 criminals pulling off an operation in exactly 16 minutes flat. Those 2 remain free monitoring television broadcasts and viewing that $1.2 million bounty, realizing passing time makes a confession highly likely. A pair who could actually return Nancy safely. However, detectives must initially grasp a single crucial element they probably ignored. It is an extremely basic, everyday fact that usually goes unnoticed. The main entrance remained entirely unlatched. Nancy Guthrie, the unbolted entry hypothesis. The reason a mere pair guards the truth. During our last deep dive, we unpacked former FBI profiler Johnny Grusing's identification concept. The thought of Nancy peering past the iron fencing, spotting the abductor's identity, and realizing they were acquainted ultimately signed her death warrant. C. Grusing figured someone coaxed Nancy to the entrance, prompting her to swing it wide open. Spotting an individual completely out of place at 2 a.m. and that sudden familiarity forced them to snatch her rather than fleeing alone. That makes for a solid argument and might hold validity. Yet currently, a different professional brings a fresh angle capable of busting this mystery wide open. Morgan Wright refused to strictly review clues from a distance. He avoided merely reading cop files or watching ring cameras. The guy flew to Tucson. He patrolled Nancy's lot and stood in the suspect's exact footprint. He thoroughly inspected the actual environment firsthand. His findings introduce vital chunks to this riddle, elements that merge nicely with Grusing's thoughts to formulate a sharper image of the evening's events. Following our previous upload, fresh updates surfaced details completely backing up Morgan's assessment through surprisingly unique angles. Federal agents secured dashcam video of Nancy's daytime Uber trip heading over to her kid's place. Authorities are tearing that tape apart, searching for stalkers tailing her vehicle, tracking her daily steps, and mapping out her timetable. Detectives are digging into locals leaving the Catalina Foothills neighborhood right past February 1st. The FBI wants to know if anybody packed up abruptly after Nancy vanished. This investigation recently transitioned into something the cops label a grueling slog. That upfront heavy surge of operational manpower, countless cops, helpful locals, and trackers have heavily decreased. The majority of the Puma County Sheriff's crew went back to normal shifts. Merely a tiny dedicated unit remains grinding on this mystery round the clock beside the FBI. DNA traces shipped to a boutique Florida facility remain under strict laboratory review. Techs call the swabs blended and low-level, meaning they hold a mashup of different human profiles, making extraction extremely tough. High-tech screening, like running familial bloodline comparisons, might eat up several weeks or months. The exact science that nailed the Golden State Killer is tackling Nancy's mystery. Yet despite a $1.2 million bounty, $1 million from the Guthries, $100,000 from the FBI, plus $100,000 secretly donated, nobody has stepped up bringing evidence capable of blowing this investigation wide open. That final point plays a massive role in Morgan Wright's hypothesis, and we are going to unpack the reason shortly. Before anything else, we should discuss Morgan Wright's background and exactly why his opinions matter. Just a quick heads up before getting into Morgan's discoveries. For those just joining us, our recent breakdown explored former FBI agent Johnny Grew's recognition theory completely. You can find that clip down below. We are expanding on those basics today by looking through another specialist's eyes at recently uncovered clues. For anyone tracking NY's situation who wants all possibilities thoroughly checked, all hypotheses tested, and all clues reviewed, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. Here at Crime Uncovered, we never walk away when things get tough. We refuse to quit after that first wave of public interest dies down. We stick around until truth emerges. Subscribe today since Nancy Guthrie deserves exactly that. Morgan Wright is definitely not just some guy reading about mysteries on social media boards. As an ex-investigator, he worked the streets for years. He handled abductions, murders, and dead ends everyone else abandoned. He tackled investigations where relatives felt helpless and clues simply vanished. Right now, he leads the National Center for Open and Unsolved Cases, a crew built entirely to crack the tough mysteries that regular cops could never solve. His team offers unique viewpoints, modern tech, and alternative tactics. So when Nancy Guthrie vanished, Morgan refused to merely watch the broadcasts. He chose to jump right into the thick of it. Getting on a plane to Tucson, he drove to the Catalina foothills and called the cops. Requesting access to the location was essential since Morgan grasps a concept about police work that most folks completely miss. Actual locations reveal details that paperwork totally misses. Sure, reading about blood spatter in some file is fine. Yet being out on that deck, measuring the true gap between entrance and street, checking the view, and sensing the yard's actual flow reveals secrets no folder ever will. That is exactly why Morgan visited. He planted his feet right on NY's deck, the exact spot holding her blood where the struggle happened, and everything flipped. Leaving the main entrance, he took the stairs and followed the path straight to the street. Taking in the landscape, he evaluated street lamps' views from next-door security lens positions and potential getaway paths. His goal was grasping not simply the events themselves, but how they even occurred. Those discoveries completely shifted his whole perspective on this mystery. Morgan explained his trip during an in-depth talk about his results, noting he physically went out to the Tucson property himself. All the blood vanished where the path finished. Heading down the stairs and stepping onto the pavement, the trail just magically stops. This particular detail matters way more than you would think, and we will return to it shortly. However, Morgan spotted another issue entirely. The lack of exterior security lenses at numerous shops really shocked him, and he barely noticed any recording equipment around the big crossroads. The Catalina foothills is known as a high-end secure neighborhood, a spot where locals never stress over danger shops, skip heavy security setups, and residents sleep soundly with their garages wide open. The whole town practically runs on mutual faith and security. Morgan feels that exact sense of comfort ultimately left Nancy exposed. She was never reckless. She simply had zero cause for panic. A very distinct mindset guides Morgan through this particular mystery, an approach he crafted while clearing dead ends for years. He insists that cops already hold every single clue required to finish this. Detectives just have to pause for a second, drop their arrogance, completely leave their vanity outside, and invite outsiders to take a look. He isn't trashing the detectives handling NY's situation or calling them incompetent at all. He is simply sharing hard-earned wisdom. Staring at the same clues endlessly eventually makes you blind to the obvious details. You build a storyline until it becomes absolute wholly and completely undeniable. Once that occurs, important facts slip right by. Morgan offered an incredible illustration showing exactly how this plays out. Consider the Long Island serial killer Rex Hoyman and the Gilgo Beach killings. The mystery stayed cold for a decade after victims turned up in 2010. Relatives suffered and cops dug around, yet nobody was handcuffed. Then in 2023, Rex Hoyerman got busted. Did fresh clues suddenly appear? Not at all. A brand new squad of detectives simply reviewed the exact same files they already had. Call logs, mobile pings, car paperwork, and bystander interviews were literally sitting right there the entire time. Someone just had to view the material from another angle. Morgan feels NY's situation is practically identical, especially since the porch camera clips exist. The crimson stains exist. The schedule is documented. The Uber dashcam exists. Mobile tracking numbers are absolutely real. Every single piece is currently sitting inside police storage, FBI networks, and local county folders. We merely have to analyze it differently while operating under the belief that she was hunted, not randomly chosen, assuming just a pair of individuals played a part rather than a big crew. Recognizing the entrance might have been left unlatched instead of broken into, Morgan feels that shifting these perspectives will lead us straight to Nancy. Following up on our previous discussion about Johnny Grew's identification concept, a few major updates have surfaced in Nancy's investigation. These breakthroughs shift our current understanding while backing up Morgan Wright's breakdown in pretty surprising ways. Number one, and definitely the biggest deal federal agents secured and are reviewing the rideshare video from January 31st. Nancy caught a ride from her place to her daughter Annie's residence later that day. Just an ordinary trip on an average afternoon. Nancy simply planned to hang out with her relatives. This rideshare recording could actually be the final clip of a living Nancy Guthrie, aside from that front porch lens captured the following dawn. Federal investigators have kept tight-lipped regarding whatever turned up on that recording. Authorities are refusing to share publicly what the clip reveals or lacks, yet they remain busy scrutinizing every single second. Agents are hunting for anybody potentially tailing Nancy's hired car. They want to spot any automobile mirroring her route or some bystander keeping tabs from afar while she departed her property and pulled up to Annie's. Detectives are hunting for clues that a stalker verified Nancy's daily routine, confirming she would stay away for an extended period, ensuring she would arrive back exhausted after dark. Since if Morgan is on the money, assuming this was a premeditated snatching, the perpetrator absolutely had to understand Nancy's habits. They had to figure out her arrival times, her solitary moments, rather than simply when she appeared defenseless. That specific car trip might expose the stalking leading right up to the incident. Moving to point number 2, based on coverage by News Nation and various media channels, federal agents are checking into locals who relocated outside the Catalina foothills region right around February 1st. That is a massive deal. Right after Nancy vanished without a trace, the majority of the local residents stuck around. They gladly assisted the authorities. These folks handed over their security recordings. They responded to inquiries, yet a handful packed up. Naturally, the feds are demanding reasons. Did it just happen by chance? Had they organized these relocations beforehand? Or perhaps a person bailed because they held secrets, witnessed an event, or desperately needed space from the probing detectives. Federal investigators are currently hunting these specific folks down, questioning them and digging into any potential ties they might hold to Nancy or her estate. Number 3, the probe just hit what detectives label the grueling stretch. During the initial weeks following Nancy vanishing, funding and manpower seemed completely boundless. Tons of police staff, eager helpers, emergency recovery units, and federal operatives jetting in from every corner of the nation. However, maintaining that kind of massive mobilization forever just isn't realistic. Currently, based on recent updates, the vast majority of the Puma County Sheriff's Office went right back to their standard assignments. That gigantic sweep was severely reduced. Just a tiny dedicated unit, roughly 5 or 6 local investigators alongside federal agents, is putting in 40 hours a week on Nancy's file. That absolutely does not imply they tossed this mystery aside. It simply shows the operation pivoted away from physically hunting toward carefully breaking down the physical clues, swapping foot patrols for computer files, and trading desert sweeps for digging through virtual logs. Moving to point 4, biological clues remain under the microscope at a dedicated Florida facility. Swabs lifted from Nancy's real estate are considered blended and low-level. Blended simply indicates they hold cellular blueprints from several different individuals. Perhaps it belongs to Nancy, possibly the abductor, or even normal house guests who visited previously. Low-level suggests the quantity is incredibly sparse. These traces are tiny, tough to process, and extremely prone to corruption or misreading. Thankfully, that Florida clinic focuses specifically on tackling these exact sorts of nightmare scenarios. Plus, they are fully diving into ancestral DNA tracking, that identical science responsible for nailing Joseph James D'Angelo, the notorious Golden State Killer, the very same method Johnny Grusing helped get off the ground. Rather than merely bouncing profiles against CODIS, the offender registry experts map out bloodlines, spot cousins, and zero in on targets using deep ancestral digging. The process drags. We might be waiting weeks or even months, yet this exact route cracks the most hopeless mysteries. Finally, number 5. That $1.2 million bounty remains untouched. $1 million from the Guthrie relatives, $100,000 courtesy of federal agents, and another $100,000 from a secret backer. That is life-altering cash. That is quit-your-job-today wealth. That is secure-your-whole-destiny type of funding. Yet nobody has stepped up to the plate. In Morgan Wright's eyes, this lone detail speaks louder regarding the situation than practically any other clue. We are going to unpack precisely what that signifies in just a second. All right, so let us dive into what Morgan Wright uncovered while picking apart the schedule surrounding Nancy vanishing. We are definitely not talking about the standard timeline issued by the Puma County Sheriff's Office here. Movement got triggered inside Nancy's place at 2:12 a.m. on February 1st. Then at 2:28 a.m., Nancy's cardiac device severed its connection with her cellular device. She relied on a Medtronic implant that kept tabs on her pulse and linked up to her mobile via Bluetooth. This gadget acted as a protective measure, an absolute health requirement, the moment the signal dropped at 2:28 a.m., which meant they took Nancy out of range, causing her wireless link to drop completely. Those signals generally reach roughly 30 feet. You might get slightly further under perfect circumstances, though it's rare. Therefore, by 2:28 a.m., Nancy found herself over 30 feet away from the device. Likely further than that, she was probably removed from the residence entirely and placed inside some getaway car speeding off. This leaves investigators with a crucial time frame spanning 2:12 a.m. until 2:28 a.m. Just 16 short minutes passed between that initial indoor movement and her total disappearance from the grounds. To Morgan Wright, these specific timestamps reveal a fundamental truth regarding what actually happened here. We aren't looking at some random break-in suddenly escalating into an abduction. Consider the reasoning. Picture yourself as a thief. You sneak inside a residence assuming nobody is around. Your target is easy loot like money diamonds or gadget stuff to snatch fast. Suddenly, you bump right into the 84-year-old resident. She's fully conscious. You make eye contact. How would most thieves react right then? They bolt. They definitely hate physical fights or anyone identifying them. Taking a simple robbery straight up to battery or hostage-taking isn't an option. They escape. Yet imagine, just for argument's sake, this specific intruder goes another route. They determine that dragging the resident away carries less risk than fleeing solo. Consider the exact sequence of events required over the ensuing 16 minutes. Initially, the intruder must actually choose this path. They must fight their core urge to escape. Then they fully pivot toward a completely separate offense, carrying vastly harsher penalties. Next up, the criminal needs to subdue an 84-year-old lady who remains conscious, perfectly alert, and likely fighting back. Nancy was far from weak. She stayed incredibly fit, could easily yell out, and wouldn't just surrender. Furthermore, the attacker requires a ride, some sort of car. Yet where's it sitting? Under impulsive circumstances, that ride is probably left streets away. That implies the intruder either had to phone an accomplice for pickup or abandon Nancy momentarily to fetch their own ride. Following that, the culprit must quickly determine a drop-off location. Grabbing a hostage requires knowing exactly where you're heading and what happens afterward. Moving on, those bloody spots outside demand immediate cleanup. He has to drag a wounded Nancy out, all while ensuring no further clues are dropped. Finally, the suspect physically wrestles Nancy out of the residence, out the entryway, off the stairs, over the path, straight toward the waiting car. Every single bit of that accomplished within 16 minutes. Morgan phrased it perfectly during his chat. Over 16 short minutes, an ordinary thief suddenly figures, "I'll snatch this person instead," forcing them to instantly coordinate rides, sort out tricky details, and maybe even summon an accomplice over. The whole theory falls apart rapidly. The math just fails. There simply isn't enough time. The planning is way too complicated, and the necessary teamwork demands far too much skill to just happen randomly. An ordinary thief lacks that degree of foresight, that amount of support, and such rapid maneuvering. However, a person targeting Nancy deliberately, an individual with their ride already idling right outside, changes everything. We're talking about an attacker possessing a prearranged destination, a criminal who meticulously mapped out their schedule path and tactics beforehand. Under those circumstances, a 16-minute window fits the bill perfectly. It provides sufficient leeway for executing a scheme, though not nearly enough for making things up. Morgan wrapped it up bluntly. He began considering two options. Did a break-in turn disastrous, or was theft never the goal? He leans increasingly toward this being a highly focused kidnapping. Nothing about this feels accidental or spur of the moment. It was heavily calculated, premeditated, and deeply intentional. Pulled off flawlessly. Thus, assuming we rule out petty theft and accept Nancy was the prize, a major mystery still lingers. What was their way in absolutely zero proof exists, showing anyone smashed their way onto the premises. The wrought iron barrier out front sat perfectly intact. Investigators found zero pry indentations or signs of tampering, plus all glass panes remained completely whole. Nobody battered the entryway down. Deadbolts lacked any scratching from lockpicks, leaving the house completely undisturbed. Therefore, who slips into Nancy's residence around 2 a.m., leaving zero trace? Morgan Wright offers an explanation, tying it all together. His idea is incredibly basic, making it super easy to miss. The knob was never secured beforehand. He points out she was an 84-year-old senior. She resided in a neighborhood experiencing basically zero illegal activity. He mentioned even he accidentally leaves his own garage wide open overnight sometimes. Is it really that crazy to assume an 84-year-old lady running on pure routine and assuming everything is secure simply forgot to latch the deadbolt? Ponder this scenario for a second. Nancy returned around 10 p.m. that January 31st. Tommaso, her son-in-law, had just dropped her off after visiting Annie. Exhaustion had likely set in after such a lengthy afternoon. Hanging out with relatives takes energy. Being 84, she just strolled through the foyer, lugging her handbag. Her mind probably drifted toward winding down, doing her nighttime routine, or swallowing her daily pills. After all, the Catalina foothills ranks among Tucson's most secure suburbs. Lawbreaking rarely ever happens up there. Residents genuinely never stress about deadbolts, and plenty even let their garages stay gaping open until dawn. For a long time, Nancy called that place home without a single issue, giving her a true sense of security. Coming in that evening, she probably secured the sturdy wrought iron exterior barrier, since that is the obvious defense measure most folks would verify. Yet consider the primary entryway just past it. Could it be that, drained from a demanding schedule and running on autopilot, she simply failed to engage the lock? Imagine if Nancy assumed everything was bolted tight when it genuinely was not. She might have drifted off, assuming she was totally protected, while her entryway remained completely unlatched. That theory perfectly accounts for the whole puzzle. There was zero sign of a break-in simply because breaking in was unnecessary. The exterior grating stayed intact because an unbreached outer perimeter means nothing once the inner entrance is left wide open. Smashed glass was absent because a much simpler route existed. All it took was gripping the knob, swinging it wide, and slipping indoors quietly, leaving zero evidence behind. That brings us to the core of Morgan's hypothesis. An unlatched entryway suggests the intruder probably checked the handle beforehand to see if it would give. The perpetrator wasn't guessing. They actively verified it by walking right up, grabbing the knob, twisting it, and discovering the door was totally free to open. This implies the suspect was already lurking right up against the house to make that discovery, indicating they were well aware Nancy was inside and were simply biding their time. This definitely was not a random drifter who just stumbled into an easy opportunity. It had to be a person familiar with Nancy's daily schedule, fully aware she would return in the late hours, completely exhausted, and counting on her to neglect the deadbolt. We are talking about a nearby resident, an individual who knew the area well and had kept her under close surveillance. The second they nudged that knob and felt it give way, they realized their perfect window had arrived. As Morgan Wright traced the route from Nancy's front steps down toward where cars park, he kept his eyes peeled for a single crucial detail: the crimson stains. We are already aware that Nancy's bodily fluids were discovered right near her front door. Sheriff Chris Nanos openly stated that fact to the press. Lab results confirmed those drops belonged to Nancy, yet Morgan needed to map out the exact location, the distance the droplets traveled, and their specific shape since forensic trails always tell the truth. Red stains narrate the entire sequence of events. Therefore, Morgan personally reviewed the location, uncovering a rather glaring detail. I actually took a trip down to Tucson to inspect the property myself. The red trail completely halts right where the paved path terminates. Following the stairs downward and stepping onto the vehicle pad, the stains abruptly vanish. Take a second to really process what that implies. Those drops do not carry on toward the asphalt road. They aren't sprinkled randomly throughout the grass, nor do they branch out on different paths. The trail ceases at a highly deliberate location. It cuts off precisely where the foot traffic merges with the parking surface. That is the literal position someone would idle a car. Really consider the massive implications of that fact. Assuming Nancy suffered an attack near the entrance, which we know happened due to the stains and was subsequently transported away, her injuries would naturally leave a trackable path, and this particular path halts decisively. It does not look like the messy, frantic scatter of a disorganized scuffle. It pinpoints the exact zone an assailant would pull up a ride to efficiently shove their victim into the back seat, giving Morgan a massive clue about Nancy's abductor. The attacker perfectly mapped out their staging area rather than leaving the getaway car blocks away and lugging her there. Lugging a victim that far would extend the forensic evidence dramatically and wildly increase the chances of a local resident spotting them. The suspect also avoided stopping halfway up the concrete, a spot where their headlamps could have easily caught the attention of passing traffic. Instead, the driver idled at the absolute best angle to shift Nancy off the stoop down the stairs and straight into the waiting ride as swiftly and stealthily as humanly possible. Looking at it from Nancy's front door, the total distance from the top stair to the getaway spot measures roughly 20 feet or less. 20 feet translates to merely seconds of transit time. The perpetrator avoided any prolonged lifting, dragging through the lawn, or lingering in the view of potential bystanders and surveillance lenses. It was a lightning-fast, straightforward transfer from start to finish. This attack was definitely not pieced together on the fly. The culprit wasn't freaking out and making spontaneous choices. This attacker had plotted the whole thing out beforehand, fully understanding the home's exterior design. They clearly recognized what could be seen from the adjacent homes and deliberately mapped out the quickest, most concealed route to the getaway ride. The perpetrator orchestrated this entire ordeal, and the remaining forensic droplets completely back up that conclusion. Those stains fade out right where a tactical mind would stage a getaway car far from the chaotic spread a frantic or spontaneous criminal would produce. It highlights pure precision. At this stage, Morgan Wright zeroes in on an incredibly narrow deduction about the case. This particular insight provides the strongest glimmer of optimism for bringing Nancy home safely. Morgan strongly suspects that no more than a pair of individuals orchestrated her vanishing. We aren't dealing with an entire crew, an organized mob, or a sprawling network of co-conspirators. It boils down to a lone wolf or maybe a duo at best. Why is Morgan so confident in this exact head count? The massive bounty reveals the truth. Currently, authorities are dangling a staggering $1.2 million for any tip that locates Nancy. The Guthrie family independently put up $1 million of that cash. The FBI pitched in an additional $100,000, while a secret backer threw in another $100,000. Just wrap your head around that level of wealth. A payout of $1.2 million would completely alter the average citizen's reality. That is clear your mortgage type of cash or quit your day job forever wealth. It means saying goodbye to money stress permanently. A sum like that shatters close bonds, obliterates criminal loyalties, and easily makes people push past their terror to grab the bag. Even with such a massive financial bounty sitting right there on the table, 50 agonizing days vanished alongside endless news segments and pleas from the FBI, yet solid leads remain completely elusive. Not a single soul phoned authorities offering that missing puzzle piece, and absolutely nobody has stepped up to collect Morgan's $1.2 million. To Wright, that lingering silence paints an incredibly clear picture. Morgan put it quite frankly during his sit-down conversation. "We hardly know each other, but I'd turn you over to the cops for $50,000 in a heartbeat." He is just being ruthlessly real about basic human greed and typical behavioral patterns around serious cash. Whenever you dangle $1.2 million, Morgan added, and literally nothing happens, what exactly are we supposed to take away from that? His conclusion was straightforward. We are definitely looking at a remarkably tight circle, definitely one individual, but absolutely no more than two. The exact second a solo actor shares their dark reality, the secret instantly dies. Just run through the reasoning behind his theory. The rationale is incredibly bulletproof. Imagine a scenario where 5 separate individuals orchestrated Nancy's vanishing. What is the actual likelihood every single one of them stays completely quiet? At least one crew member would stare at $1.2 million and instantly daydream a brand new lifestyle. Inevitable arguments would spark major divides within the group. Remorse would ultimately consume somebody until they desperately needed an exit strategy, resulting in a full confession. Even a trio follows that exact same behavioral pattern. Having 3 suspects basically guarantees 3 distinct vulnerabilities, meaning 3 completely separate internal moral compasses. That provides a trio of chances for selfishness or deep regret to utterly crush any allegiances. Someone cracks eventually. However, duos completely flip that entire script. Since any potential leak instantly points the finger squarely at the only possible snitch, it quickly turns into guaranteed mutual ruin. Turn me over to the authorities, and I will absolutely drag you down too. A dual death sentence basically guarantees totally zipped lips. This has absolutely nothing to do with unbreakable bonds of friendship or criminal genius. It solely relies on the sheer paralyzing terror of mutual annihilation, which perfectly explains why Morgan assumes the $1.2 million remains sitting in a bank account. That massive payout simply cannot shatter a circle built on intense, isolated paranoia. Yet a distinct glimmer of optimism actually hides within this specific theory. A 2-person crew leaves a remarkably tiny footprint behind. Such a small unit leaves significantly fewer breadcrumbs for detectives to chase, drawing far less outside attention, while heavily minimizing the odds of making sloppy mistakes. Simultaneously, it drastically limits how many shoulders actually have to support the crushing psychological weight of hiding that horrific truth. Dark realities of this magnitude almost never stay completely buried in the shadows when simply shared between a duo. A horribly heavy conscience will eventually strike one of the culprits. Nancy lived 84 years acting as a cherished matriarch and loving parent. Kidnapping her carried immense emotional weight, meaning somebody will eventually start reconsidering that $1.2 million. Perhaps financial ruin suddenly hits them incredibly hard, or their everyday reality takes a drastic, unexpected nosedive. Pure, unadulterated panic might just conquer their terror of prison. A confession will inevitably slip out to a trusted wife, buddy, or relative who could then dial the FBI immediately. A massive critical blunder is bound to happen eventually, like letting a completely contradictory detail slip out in casual conversation, exhibiting bizarre behaviors, drastically shifting daily schedules out of nowhere, or just mentally collapsing under the sheer exhausting pressure of keeping perfectly quiet. The exact moment that inevitable domino finally falls, investigators will undoubtedly locate Nancy once and for all. Morgan Wright actually delivered a specific word of advice for the task force currently handling Nancy's investigation. Crucially, this should absolutely never be interpreted as harsh criticism. Rather, it's guidance from a veteran who walked in those exact shoes. He confidently emphasized that every required clue already sits right in their current evidence boxes. The smartest move involves a serious tactical pause, deliberately checking all personal vanity at the front door, dropping any defensive attitudes to welcome an entirely unburdened set of investigators. Morgan absolutely never claimed the current squad dropped the ball. He never accused anyone of ignoring glaring red flags or botching basic police procedures. His actual point digs significantly deeper into human psychology. Grinding away at a singular mystery for countless weeks naturally forces a detective's brain to construct a very specific storyline regarding the timeline of events. That internal plotline eventually turns into hardened cement. Suddenly, you find yourself automatically forcing every single forensic detail to perfectly match your preconceived notion. Every now and then, you desperately need to shatter those tinted glasses. Morgan painted a rather flawless historical picture to highlight why this mental pivot matters so much. Take the Gilgo Beach murders out on Long Island featuring Rex Hoyman. Authorities discovered multiple victims back in 2010, exposing a predator active for years. Federal agents jumped in immediately, while Suffolk County authorities dumped endless man-hours into the hunt without slapping cuffs on a single viable suspect. The trail eventually froze solid over a completely agonizing decade of grieving loved ones and a totally distracted media landscape until Rex Hoyman unexpectedly got nabbed in 2023. So what finally changed the game? Did crime scene techs suddenly uncover fresh DNA, or did a guilty bystander inexplicably break a 10-year vow of total silence? Was it some groundbreaking laboratory innovation? Hardly. A totally different task force simply took the reins without carrying any previous bias into the war room. Those unburdened rookies essentially grabbed the old cardboard boxes full of cellular pings, call logs, and motor vehicle paperwork, alongside decades-old witness testimonies and dusty forensic reports, choosing to view those exact same puzzle pieces differently. They simply asked entirely new questions. They connected dots differently, completely challenging assumptions everyone previously treated as gospel fact, ultimately cracking the mystery with a fresh perspective instead of brand new clues. Morgan firmly suspects that Nancy's current investigative gridlock suffers from that exact same brand of severe tunnel vision. That porch camera video is already out there, scrubbed over and over again. Still looking at it with a fresh perspective might reveal hidden details we missed earlier. We have the physical DNA trails. They went through the labs and all the paperwork. However, looking at it as a planned kidnapping rather than a botched break-in alters everything. We already have the schedule of events. Movement triggered at 2:12 a.m. Heart monitor failed at 2:28 a.m. Viewing those 16 minutes as calculated rather than chaotic totally shifts the narrative. That rideshare dashcam footage is real and federal agents possess it. Yet knowing exactly what to seek might expose a lurking car, a hidden observer, or a subtle trend previously overlooked in those frames. Tracking records are there. Network signals application logs and electronic trails from nearby devices that evening. Hunting for a pair rather than a whole crew could totally shift how we interpret those logs. We also have bystander testimonies. Locals caught weird noises, spotted odd movements, or felt things were amiss. A modern review could link those bizarre hints in brand new ways. Every single piece of this material currently rests inside police storage, digital archives, and written case logs. Nobody has to hunt for these clues. They simply require a completely new perspective. Morgan admitted that fortune plays a huge role. Being fortunate often beats being skilled, especially when a random civilian happens to catch a crucial conversation. He shared a different scenario from his personal career history. An old college buddy, a Cincinnati investigator, spent ages tackling a 44-year-old mystery. It was the sole uncracked police murder the town ever had. Things felt absolutely hopeless. Years flew by, bystanders passed away, and physical clues completely deteriorated. Still, the team returned to the drawing board and conducted brand new interrogations. Pushing different angles led a relative to nonchalantly admit their father murdered that officer. Following 44 years of silence, somebody finally spilled the beans. Morgan feels confident NY's situation will unfold identically. Remaining stubborn is crucial here, and continuously chasing down leads remains absolutely essential for a breakthrough. You must occasionally welcome the unknown and lean into it. However, once that perfect window opens, the mystery unravels completely. That exact moment is approaching since hidden truths always surface eventually. This rings especially true when only a pair shares the burden. With $1.2 million at stake, silence breaks. It fractures even faster once new investigators start pressing the exact right buttons. Morgan Wright goes way beyond standard police tactics to crack NY's investigation. He leverages software that was pure sci-fi just 5 years back. These modern tools are currently cracking mysteries everyone deemed completely unsolvable. He brought up an instrument known as network traffic tracking. The average guy has zero clue about the massive digital footprint their cellular devices produce. Practically everything on your screen, networking platforms, forecasts, video games, retail stores, constantly harvest your geographical position. That permission hides inside the user agreements everyone ignores. Corporations bundle the majority of those details together, making them totally available to buy and scrutinize. Morgan stated he ran a comprehensive network sweep circling New York's property to dig up any hidden clues. Translating that to reality, Morgan actually viewed which mobile devices passed through New York's block that evening. He just could not view personal identities attached. Everything gets stripped of personal details, yet the hardware itself drops unique electronic fingerprints. Therefore, catching a device normally stationed across Tucson randomly popping up by NY's place at 2 a.m. on February 1st becomes a massive red flag. Tracking that precise cell device leaving the zone via a calculated path establishes a clear and obvious behavioral trend. Finding that identical handset returning to NY's block, previously perhaps doing surveillance runs on January 11th and 24th, builds a rock-solid link. The hardware and information are both readily available. Someone simply has to process everything the right way. Morgan brought up departure mapping too. This technique charts out every single conceivable path an individual might utilize while fleeing a scene. Morgan pointed out that fleeing New York's property only offers a handful of realistic escape paths toward a major highway. Eventually, suspects must merge onto organized streets that connect directly with other paved arteries and the freeway system. The Catalina foothills resemble a total labyrinth packed with twisting neighborhood lanes, dead ends, and gated avenues. Yet charting the terrain reveals extremely restricted options to reach an arterial boulevard from NY's place. Driving cross-country with a hostage inside the vehicle simply isn't feasible. Sticking to paved avenues is mandatory. Furthermore, those thoroughfares naturally bottleneck into highly anticipated corridors. Plotting those escape lanes and comparing them against video records pulled from local storefronts and intersection lenses, alongside front porch lenses scattered on those avenues, allows detectives to trace the exact journey of the suspect's ride. Missing direct video of the target car isn't a deal breaker. Crossing off paths where lenses caught zero sketchy activity automatically shrinks the hunting ground. Morgan successfully applied this exact tactic previously. He recently touched on collaborating alongside the Texas Rangers for an investigation. Applying those identical strategies, network tracking, escape charting, and hitting stale clues with an entirely new perspective. He handed the squad 19 pages of intelligence they never even realized existed. It was data sitting right under their noses the entire time. The solution simply required proper equipment and searching the correct locations. Morgan additionally shared that his daily job centers around utilizing smart tech alongside tailored commands to solve police cases. Smart algorithms have the ability to spot hidden trends within information that traditional detectives often overlook. This tech compares countless pieces of information in mere moments, provided you feed it the exact right inquiries. Morgan leads a class detailing the ways to utilize targeted commands, highly exact, meticulously designed queries meant to pull actionable intelligence out of machine learning models rather than basic replies. The goal is never to take jobs away from law enforcement. The objective is providing cops with resources to process clues with greater speed and deep precision. Every bit of this innovation is available today. Detectives are actively utilizing it today, which might ultimately locate Nancy. We should take a breather and review the materials cops currently possess. Think about what currently rests inside police storage and digital archives. That rideshare clip, for instance. Federal agents possess tape showing NY enjoying her final ordinary day. You can see her climbing inside a hired car heading to visit her kid, grinning, chatting, and just going about her daily routine. However, an unseen observer could have been lurking. A stalker might have trailed that vehicle to verify New York's daily habits, ensuring the house remained empty for a long time. Those recorded clips might actually reveal the stalking that happened right before the abduction. Then there is the security camera tape showing a disguised person standing by NY's front door at 1:47 a.m. They wore a dark face covering hand protection shadowy outfits and a forward-facing weapon harness. Johnny Gruing pointed out this setup lacked military sense, hinting the suspect lacked real combat experience while carrying a 25-liter Ozark trail bag. The intruder was messing with the lens. Experts have torn this video apart countless times, yet a different perspective could uncover unspotted details. Perhaps it lies in the suspect's walking style. It could be their physical stature or body shape, or even a hidden clue lurking behind them. Then we have the biological clues. Lab results confirm the red stains out front absolutely belonged to NY. More importantly, those drops end abruptly at a distinct location, the spot where the sidewalk connects to the pavement precisely where a getaway ride would be parked. Those marks aren't chaotic spills, they show calculated intent and careful plotting. Then consider the 16-minute time frame. Sensors picked up activity indoors at 2:12 a.m. Her heart device lost its signal by 2:28 a.m. That frames the whole timeline. Just 16 minutes passed between that initial movement and Nancy getting dragged out of range for her medical monitor. That is way too quick for a spur-of-the-moment act. It perfectly matches the profile of a highly orchestrated strike. Consider the unlatched entryway hypothesis. Cops found 0 signs of break-ins and no shattered glass. The protective barrier showed no harm, nor were there any tool scratches. Since nothing was destroyed, Nancy either let them in or she forgot to throw the deadbolt. Morgan strongly leans toward the second option, just an innocent slip-up in a secure community that handed the culprit their chance. Consider the $1.2 million bounty, a massive payout that still has not brought in the smoking gun lid. To Morgan, this proves the truth remains guarded by a tiny circle, hardly more than a couple of individuals, since big crews usually turn on each other when life-changing money is dangled. GPS coordinates are logged within mobile software and signal mast histories, leaving a virtual trail from every single device nearby during that evening. Morgan already reviewed transmission logs, though federal authorities possess way deeper resources. This electronic footprint maps out travel routes and pinpoints devices sitting in weird spots at odd hours. Take the Bureau's local canvassing, for example. Agents are actively hunting down residents who packed up and left the Catalina foothills region following February 1st. They want anyone whose sudden move raises red flags, essentially folks fleeing town, to put miles between themselves and the detectives. Law enforcement is aggressively pursuing these leads as we speak. Look at the biological traces discovered down in Florida, complex faint mixtures that pose major testing challenges. However, top-tier experts are applying cutting-edge methods to them, likely involving family tree tracing. This is the exact same scientific approach used to nail the Golden State Killer. The process drags on, yet it delivers results. Everything mentioned is currently available. Right now, we aren't talking about imaginary clues we hope to uncover eventually. We are looking at real tangible and electronic proof resting inside folders and computer servers. The case simply requires a brand new viewpoint, an alternative angle, and entirely novel inquiries. Once that shift occurs and detectives review these materials believing the hit was focused, orchestrated, neighborhood-based, and pulled off by a small crew who memorized NY's schedule and spotted an unlatched entrance, Nancy will finally be located. Therefore, how did things actually unfold during the late hours of January 31st, 2026? We should trace Morgan Wright's entire hypothesis from start to finish. Nancy Guthrie arrives at her property right around 10 p.m. She spent her afternoon visiting her child Annie. The woman is exhausted after a lengthy outing, especially being 84 years of age. Tommaso, her son-in-law, gives her a ride back. She strolls up to the entryway, turns the key in the thick, wrought iron barrier, crosses the threshold, and perhaps while battling that heavy fatigue, going through the mindless motions of returning to her house, she neglects to secure the primary entryway behind the metal grating. Alternatively, she believed it was bolted, yet the latch failed to engage. In any scenario, the entrance remains wide open. She remains completely oblivious to this fact. She carries on with her nightly rituals, swallows her pills, preps for sleep, and drifts off, feeling totally secure inside a highly guarded Tucson community. However, an unseen figure is observing her, a stalker who memorized New York's daily patterns, a predator fully aware that she spent that particular daytime visiting Annie's place, someone who likely watched that rideshare drop her off, a person simply biding their time until she returned. Then, sometime after midnight, this individual walks onto NY's property. They reach for the front entrance, test the knob, and realize it isn't even bolted. This is their chance. The perfect opening. They slip inside without a sound. Zero need to smash windows. Dead silent, completely intact doors. By 2:12 a.m., sensors pick up indoor movement. Perhaps Nancy catches a noise. She might jolt awake. She could even shout into the dark. Then things get physical. Right between New York's bedroom and the entryway, chaos erupts. Nancy takes a hit, a violent struggle. The fight is brief, though, since the intruder came totally prepared, having parked their ride in the absolute perfect spot beforehand, mapping out every single second. They drag Nancy out of her residence, over the stoop, down the stairs, and across the yard. Those crimson drops track the entire route. It proves she bled during transport. The trail stops dead exactly where a car sat. Right at 2:28 a.m., NY's heart monitor drops its signal. She got taken over 30 feet away from her cell. She's inside a ride. They haul her off just 16 minutes after that initial indoor sensor tripped to the second she vanished. Way too quick to just wing it. It's the precise window needed to pull off a scheme. Now barely 2 folks know that car's destination. A mere pair of individuals know Nancy's current location today. 2 partners who called the shots mapped out the details and are now bearing the truth as a team. 2 partners glued to the news staring at that $1.2 million bounty. Knowing every passing sunrise makes a confession way more likely. Morgan Wright feels certain this is exactly what happened. This wasn't some chance encounter or a botched robbery. It was a highly calculated kidnapping, strictly homegrown, pulled off by locals familiar with both Nancy and the area itself. He firmly believes she'll be located since this duo is bound to slip up or somebody will finally spill the beans. Either new detectives spot a glaring clue that was always there, or modern tech like signal tracking, escape route mapping, and genetic genealogy will point straight to the truth. It really isn't about whether they get caught, but rather how soon. An entryway out in the Catalina foothills, the exact same patio Morgan Wright checked out several weeks back. That very spot where detectives uncovered blood, where a vicious fight went down, where Nancy Guthrie was snatched 49 days prior. Yellow blooms still blanket the driveway. Ribbons remain knotted against the heavy iron security gates. Handwritten notes offering prayers and optimism. The residence is completely silent today. That enormous manhunt has wound down. Choppers stopped buzzing overhead. The civilian searchers went back to their daily routines. Yet the official probe pushes forward. At the precinct, cops scrutinize tape second by second. In labs, experts process genetic swabs using modern gear that literally didn't exist 10 years ago. Inside, servers' smart software hunts for matching habits hidden within ping records, hunting for virtual tracks pinning suspects to the scene. Meanwhile, 2 individuals are harboring a massive lie. 2 partners knowing exactly what happened on those steps. 2 locals knowing Nancy's location. 2 individuals watching the reward swell to $1.2 million. A duo perfectly aware that new investigators are re-examining the clues from totally different angles. 2 accomplices realizing their tight circle makes covering up blunders permanently impossible. The real mystery isn't if cops catch them. It simply boils down to when. How long until the massive guilt trip finally crushes one of them? When will one notice that $1.2 million and deem it worth the risk? When will a confession to a buddy spark a call to the FBI? How much longer until software links together the tiny details regular folks overlooked? When will a new review of old items spotlight the obvious truth Nancy Guthrie is out there? Her family keeps holding on. The real story is way closer than people assume. Fade out. Morgan Wright's hypothesis offers this investigation the exact spark it so desperately craves. Pure direction. If literally just a pair of accomplices know Nancy's location, we aren't dealing with some crazy widespread cover-up. It sits with 2 distinct players. If that entryway was left unbolted, we are definitely hunting a local. A person comfortable enough to stroll up to NY's place at 2 a.m. A suspect familiar enough with her routine to strike when she was completely exposed. Assuming every piece of the puzzle is already bagged, tracking down Nancy doesn't take an act of God. Cops don't need to pray for a random stroke of luck or a bystander finally speaking up decades later. It simply demands an outside perspective re-evaluating the current files. A viewer catching this exact clip today probably holds a clue. Maybe you noticed a buddy acting super weird right after February 1st, looking overly anxious, flashing cash out of nowhere, packing up and bailing on Tucson without warning, or asking super sketchy questions regarding the search. Maybe you know someone who previously worked on NY's property, had a key, and memorized her schedule. You could have easily spotted something bizarre that evening, like an idling truck, a stranger prowling the block, or any small detail that just felt wrong. Maybe you brushed it off back then. Perhaps you used to live next door to Nancy and relocated. Authorities are hoping to speak with you. They aren't treating you like a criminal, but you probably noticed a vital clue totally by accident. Got clues? Dial 1-800, call FBI, or ring Pima County authorities at 52035-1490. There is a $1.2 million reward to find Nancy. More crucially, her 84-year-old loved one is still hoping. Savannah is missing her mom. Entire neighborhoods and relatives are holding out hope. We can absolutely crack this mystery. Morgan Wright is convinced. Our clues point exactly there, and modern forensics make it entirely possible. We only require a single missing link or a lone individual willing to break their silence. Did our breakdown give you a different perspective on Nancy's disappearance? If you think modern tech will track her down, smash that like button and leave your thoughts below. Are you convinced that just a pair of individuals hold Nancy's location? Could that entryway have been left unlatched? Join the Crime Uncovered channel and ring the bell for ongoing alerts. We never abandon tough mysteries. We stick around until the absolute truth finally comes to light. Share this upload everywhere. A viewer out there could hold a clue or piece everything together. A stranger out there could finally lead Nancy back. Our channel goes beyond mere entertainment. We actively hunt for hard facts. We battle for accountability and absolutely reject letting these mysteries go cold. Nancy Guthrie has earned the right to be located. Her loved ones are owed closure, which Morgan Wright fully expects will happen. That entryway remained unlatched. A duo knows her exact whereabouts, and sooner or later somebody will crack. We all crave that perfect, peaceful sanctuary. We work hard to build lives in quiet neighborhoods where the streetlights feel like guardians and unlocked doors feel like a symbol of trust. But the heartbreaking reality of Nancy Guthrie's story shatters that fragile illusion. An 84-year-old mother resting in her own home was stolen away simply because of a single unlatched door. It is a chilling reminder that comfort can sometimes be our greatest vulnerability. We cannot let the quietness of a neighborhood lull us into letting our guard down. Locking a door isn't about living in fear. It is an act of profound love and protection for ourselves and our families. More than that, this tragedy is a desperate call to our collective conscience. Darkness thrives when good people stay silent. Somewhere right now, two people are carrying the crushing weight of a stolen life. If you know something, if you saw a shadow out of place, you hold the power to end a family's agonizing nightmare. The truth is out there buried under fear or misplaced loyalty. Speak up. Lock your doors. Protect your neighbors.